I'm founder of riskLD. We are a real-time software diagnostics and clinical decision support company for pregnancy. I'm founder of this company because of what happened with our first pregnancy. This is not just business, it's personal. I'm going to tell you about the market need and the social need. I'll tell you what our solution is, and then we'll talk about some ways to work together. Oops. The US has 3 times the maternal mortality rate of the other developed countries. And within that, there are some awful statistics. Over 60% of the pregnancy-related deaths are avoidable. Black women have 3 to 4 times worse outcomes than white women. For every death, there's 70 near misses. And those near misses also have a cost to the healthcare system of about 2.5 times a normal delivery. We are no better on the neonatal side. There are a lot of reasons for these terrible outcomes, but our solution goes directly to the heart of the clinical side. We come out of 12 years worth of work at university hospitals in Cleveland, which has a very standard inner city population. You can see through these statistics that this population could be in any inner city in the US. And what I'll point you to is the last bullet, which Medicaid pays for 43% of the births in the US. Let's think about this for a second. 43% of the children being born in the US are being born into poverty and typically in higher than normal risk categories. And this becomes very important towards the end of the deck. So 12 years ago, the captive insurance company at the university hospital said, there are too many bad outcomes and we're paying out about $14 million a year in litigation expense associated with these pregnancies. So they paid to have a senior OB and 3 senior OB nurses full-time looking at every OB quality case. And that team has been working for 12 years to figure out what data needs to be seen, when it needs to be seen, who needs to see it, and then what they do about it to avoid a suboptimal outcome. Part of the issue is that we don't run clinical trials on pregnant women. The stated reason is that it's unethical because it could cause harm to the baby. That is part of it. The other part of it is that nobody wants to run a clinical trial on pregnant women because if something goes wrong, they get sued and they pay a lot of money. So we are dependent on this team at UH to go through all the literature and all the real world experience at UH over the last 12 years to come up with clinical practice guidelines to avoid suboptimal outcomes. So I've been in EIR for both Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals. And when the tech transfer team at UH asked me to come in and talk about this, my first question was, what are your results? Well, it turns out they were extraordinary. On paper, just using the clinical practice guidelines on paper, UH reduced their obstetric litigation costs by 93%. And they reduced their serious safety events by 92% for 5 years running. These are 2 sides of the same coin. If you have better outcomes, you have less litigation. So I told them at the first meeting, I said, I'll license this from you today due to some personal events that happened in my life. It took me 2.5 years to get that license, but I knew this was important and I knew it could change public health. So I wouldn't take a full-time job till I got that license. The clinical practice guidelines that we have licensed go all the way from the first prenatal visit all the way until mom and baby leave the hospital. Right now, we are concentrating on the spot of highest risk, which is during labor and delivery. And that's what we're putting into software right now. Our software takes 130 data feeds, medications, patient medical history, vitals, labs, and on a real-time basis, puts them together into real-time data collection, real-time diagnostic matching, real-time candidate prognosis, and real-time clinical decision support, and provides that in a graphical user interface within the patient's chart. This gives you an idea of what we're doing. On the left-hand side is a real-time data flow that we're taking into account. That leads to alerting the team when conditions have been met for a particular situation with a patient on the labor and delivery floor. If the clinical team agrees with it, then we provide them with the treatment checklist. All this is from the development of 12 years worth of work at University Hospitals in Cleveland. And their data has been peer-reviewed and published in the Journal of Obstetric Safety. I told you about the patient-level diagnostics. There's also a floor-level diagnostic, which is air traffic control. These are all the patients on the labor and delivery floor. The little red dots tell you how many alerts they've had. This allows the clinical team to allocate their resources to those most in need. By the way, coming out of COVID, the biggest need is for nurses. We just don't have nurses right now. So we need to leverage the remaining workforce, and this helps people do it effectively. The department level diagnostics let you know how the department is doing on time to treatment, which is the #1 driver of avoiding suboptimal outcomes. When we started this process, there was something interesting happening in the electronic medical records space, which was historically software like ours has been delivered by an interface called HL7, which is complex. And once you do one hospital, you have to basically redo it at the next hospital. To the government's credit, they pushed through forcing the big EMRs to have app stores. Much like you get an app on your phone, the big EMRs now all have a standardized app store interface called Smart on Fire. We are already approved in the Epic App Orchard, which means we should be able to take our software and move about 85% over to Cerner, Meditech, and the others because it's a standardized interface. That's our delivery mechanism. Here's where we are right now. For the last few years, no one has believed we'd be able to pull off the software. We have. We're bringing up 3 beta sites to show people we can do it. The first one is Contra Costa Regional Medical Center, northeast of Oakland. We go live on Wednesday. We've gone through our testing, all 700 lines of it. The software looks good. We'll go live on Wednesday. The next one will be Hackensack Meridian. We're expanding our clinical practice guidelines to take into account even more hemorrhage conditions, sepsis, and thromboembolism. The third beta site will be Barnes Jewish in St. Louis. They were going to put in the GE Mural system, but in a head-to-head competition, they said we'd rather be a beta site for riskLD. We're about to show the world that we can pull this off and that our software will provide better outcomes. We haven't been quiet in Washington, D.C. We approached the people behind the Black Maternal Health Momnibus, and in particular, one of the bills in that is called the Tech to Save Moms Act. And we approached Representative Lauren Underwood's office about a year and a half ago and said, why are you collecting more data? We know what the problem is. And they said, but who has a solution? And we said, we do. And we showed them our solution, and we've worked with them to get Republican co-sponsorship on the Tech to Save Moms Act. And in return for that, we've actually been specified in the act. There's money set aside for us to do a test with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Innovation. We will show them that by avoiding suboptimal outcomes, we can lessen NICU days and ICU days. Under Obamacare, when we can show the government that we can save them money on the 43% of births that they pay for in the US, we become a nationwide mandate. The good news is that the Tech to Save Moms Act has already passed the House. It's sitting in the Senate. And if it needs to get done, both Senators Sinema and Manchin will support pushing through this act. I don't want to do a hospital by hospital sales effort. I'd rather show CMMI what we can do and get a nationwide mandate. I want to do things at scale. This problem's too big to spend years going hospital by hospital putting it in. Having said that, things in Washington move slowly. So there are a couple of ways that we can work together. I have money in the bank right now. I'm already being approached by companies that are inquiring about, wouldn't you like to be part of a larger company? Right now, my answer is no. I want this to be bigger. I want to make sure that it gets pushed through. I don't want to get lost in a larger company. Likely, I'm going to do a Series A in Q4 once our beta sites are up and running and everybody can see the value that we provide. If you're thinking of joining us at the Series A, I will tell you, I've got a line out the door, down the street of people who say, just call us at the Series A. If some of you are willing to move forward, please come in and invest in us now. We'll convert you into whatever the valuations at the Series A. And that's a good way to come in. And I can always use more funding now because I'm just writing checks to make sure that the software works exactly as I said it would. Okay. The other way to work together is if some of you are at philanthropic entities, is to sponsor a hospital. Go to a hospital and say, we'll pay for the riskLD system to come in. We'll help you avoid suboptimal outcomes. There are a couple of ways to work together. This is our team. Steve Porter, he's an MD, MBA from Harvard. Both the MD and the MBA came from Harvard. He actually came through University Hospital's OB residency. What we do is in his DNA. He's CEO of our company and the face of our system. Susan Mann is also a Harvard professor. We got to her to try and get her to be on our advisory board. When she saw what we were doing, she said, I'll shut down my practice if I can join you full time. She has now done so. She's our chief safety training officer. She's done OB safety training at over 100 hospitals, and she's the one that's going to make sure that our system gets embedded in the workflow. Stephen Matlin has got a great background in hospital systems. He's our CTO. We have one outside board member, Dan Kellogg, who is a partner at Crystal Internet Venture Funds, which did SaaS software. My background is I'm an engineer, MBA from the Yale School of Management, serial entrepreneur in healthcare. But riskLD is different. This one's personal. And that's why we're going to see it through to success.